Mike, I'll start with your reaction to this blockbuster deal.
Yeah, this is a deal that really makes sense from both sides. So let's start from Arizona. You have an aging legend in Larry Fitzgerald. You have a young quarterback in Kyle Murray. You're getting maybe the best receiver in football in DeAndre Hopkins. This guy 2 years ago had 0 drops, which is virtually impossible to have. It's impossible to do that in practice, let alone games. So if I'm Arizona, that makes a lot of sense. What it really does now too, Matt, it lets them strategically set up to go into the draft to draft an offensive tackle, which they need to do. This draft is loaded with at least 4 first-round offensive tackles. If you're Houston, reportedly, according to Adam Schefter, they're going to be acquiring David Johnson, which means they're going to go with Kenny Stills and William Fuller outside. Look, you're losing Hopkins. He's a great player. We know that. But if healthy, Fuller and Stills give you tremendous firepower on the outside. And David Johnson, one of the things that I like about him in particular is he has really good hands. So even though he's nowhere near what DeAndre Hopkins is in the passing game, David Johnson is a 3-down running back. They're going to presumably lose Lamar Miller in free agency now, and I can see why Houston needs to create some cap room. We also have to remember the Houston Texans in back-to-back seasons don't have a draft choice in the top 50, so they have to look for other ways to improve the team. You don't like to lose Hopkins, but David Johnson's a good player.
So if I'm translating what you're saying, you're a GM for both of these teams. You believe, based on what we've seen in the parameters of this deal, that each team got a victory with what they were looking for? Because on the surface, it seems like Arizona got the better end of this.
Yeah, it certainly does, Matt, especially when you align the pieces. If we're building Arizona, we got Murray. He played better than expectations, certainly better than I did. You could draft an offensive lineman, which is the strength of this draft, and now you could get arguably one of the top 3 wide receivers in all of football. Makes a ton of sense from Arizona's perspective. Again, Houston's boxed themselves a little bit into a corner. When you go to back-to-back years without being able to get a draft choice in the top 50, David Johnson's a guy that's going to come in and help your offense. And since you have William Fuller, Kenny Stills was part of that trade last year for Laramie Tunsil. Kenny Stills is a player I had in Miami. He's very explosive, so you can still hit home runs in that Texan offense between Fuller and Stills, despite losing a great player in Hopkins.
And you'd mentioned Fuller. He's an explosive player, but he never stays healthy. If both those guys get on the field at the same time, perhaps with David Johnson, who knows with Deshaun Watson what Houston gets out of this. Mike Tannenbaum, we know we get more of you coming up top of the hour on NFL Live, the blockbuster deal we've been waiting to see happen. For more on it, let's go back to Elle.
Okay, so Mike Tannenbaum thinks it's a win-win situation with David Johnson heading to the Texans, DeAndre Hopkins heading to Arizona. Let's bring in Marcus Spears. What's your reaction to that blockbuster trade?
I mean, I'm amazed. I thought him and obviously Deshaun Watson had a great rapport. I thought that was a match made in heaven, and I thought those guys could make noise. But obviously they want to do work in the trenches with the Houston Texans, and I'm sure O'Brien having that authority to make those moves offensively and defensively, using DeAndre Hopkins as a bargaining chip to get some draft picks and also bringing David Johnson over. But I just don't know if I would move D-Hop off my football team, a dynamic playmaker like that.
Yeah, Spears, imagine this world. You could have had DeAndre Hopkins for a very reasonable $12.5 million this year, and I do know that Adam Schefter said he is looking for a long-term deal, but $12.5 million this year, you now have David Johnson for $11.25 million. Do you think that's a good return on your investment?
No, mind blown, Elle, and I don't know where to go from there outside of the fact that this is a passing league now and you just let go one of the best receivers in the NFL.
And in particular, when you're talking about, and again, David Johnson hampered with injury, they did make that trade for Kenyon Drake. It certainly took away some of his productivity, but coming off a really down year, 375 yards on the ground for David Johnson. And what was a prolific career up to last year. But again, Bruce Arians is gone, and a lot of that productivity dipped. Marcus Spears joining us to break down the first of hopefully many blockbuster deals. DeAndre Hopkins is headed to the desert. David Johnson is headed to Texas.
Hi everyone, thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports, more analysis, download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus. We'll see you there.